Welcome again. This is within our series. This is the second part, and we are very happy to welcome Christophe Maire here today. Also a colleague of his, a sort of colleague of his, André Eggert, who isn't here yet, but he will be joining us very soon. Christophe Maire is here to talk to us or be here as a partner to talk with us about how to successfully start up your enterprise in respect of not too much of legal terms, but how to get investments going, how to have the financial side set up, what is very interesting for you, especially right at the beginning. Now you have read, of course you've read his CV, if you have to read his CV, if he isn't known to you. So I'm not going to repeat that, but I was particularly interested to see that you, I believe, wouldn't mind being called an investor in Berlin, because originally you're not from Berlin at all, but you seem to like it to be in Berlin and to push the startup scene. So this is why I would call him an investor in Berlin. And I also believe that you wouldn't mind to be called a creator and a designer, meaning that you're not only interested in bringing money, but also in helping to shape the companies that you're interested in. And also, he is what I would call a lobbyist of the future, because he tended to say that the future doesn't have a lobby. And I believe he's one of the lobbyists for the future. And we're really happy to have you here. And again, it's very special to have him here to answer questions, because this is what we're doing. This is not a sole lecture series, but it's in a way a dialogue series. And fantastic. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I'd like to go through a few things before maybe we start a dialogue. The first one being why I believe that entrepreneurship so important is, and why I think it's something worth fighting for and getting into. I would like then to go through some lesson that I learned as an entrepreneur, before maybe discussing some themes that I believe are hot. I hope there are some ongoing entrepreneurs in this room, and some themes that I'm looking into today, not as an entrepreneur, but as a seed investor. And then maybe the last point, and then we can share that a bit with André when he comes, is what I'm looking for in a new startup, when I meet a new team, and when I try to decide whether it makes sense to back someone. So starting with the core of what we're doing, I strongly believe that entrepreneurs are the heroes of our time. I believe that they are in the position to shape things. That means solving significant problems. I work today with people who tackle water quality, with people who tackle mobility issues. Clearly, a lot of the problem humanity is facing in the next 50 years is hopefully going to be solved by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are also going to be the ones creating the next million jobs, and there is clearly a competition between continents as to where these jobs will be created, and this is one of the reasons I believe Europe and Germany in particular should be much more aware and active supporting entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is also, the reason I use the word heroes is also because it is very hard. A lot of the companies that I believe in today will fail. Failing as an entrepreneur when you fought very hard is very painful. At the same time, it is part of this Cambrian effect and this creation process that entrepreneurship is all about. It's very much on a macro level. It's a number game. It takes a lot of entrepreneurs working on similar things in order for a few to succeed. Linked with these two first points is one concept that I very much look for when talking to entrepreneurs, which is mission-driven founders. And what I mean with mission-driven founders is founders who are fundamentally identified with a problem they're trying to solve. And one thing that I really tell to ongoing entrepreneurs is make sure you work on something you're really passionate about, because it's going to be harder than you think. Entrepreneurship is also a function of not fully understanding how difficult it's going to be. But if you fight for something you're very passionate about, it makes it all worthwhile. And I've backed companies that are mission-driven entrepreneurs. One example, you may know this company called Clue. Clue is a woman health app. And clearly, the founder is all heart behind this mission, which is to empower women around the world. Company today is growing very fast and is a global success. Another example is a company that also started in University of Hanover, a company called Pete, which uses artificial intelligence to help small farmers around the world identify crop disease. They take a picture, AI in the background, and then they get recommendation on how to deal with some parasite that have fallen on their crop. Clearly, something they wanted to do and worth backing. So that's my first point. Now maybe coming back to the lesson that I learned. I have a bit of an affinity for this region because my first company, I originally came in the mid-90s, early 90s to Berlin, originally from Japan. And we built a company focusing on AR and VR. So artificial reality, virtual reality. We built the first virtual studio, actually across the street here in Babelsberg, in the FX Center. And I learned my first lesson of entrepreneurship is that timing does matter. I'm not even sure times are ripe for virtual reality today, but I'm sure that in the 90s we were too early. So that was my first company. Staying with 3D animation, with 3D, in 99 I was a co-founder of a company doing digital maps, a company called Gate 5, and together with two very technical founders, we set up to put digital maps on feature phone at the time. There were no smartphones, and there I learned my second lesson. I raised money in 2000, 2001, 2002. So I got to learn a lot of venture capitalists because it was tough at the time. And I remember them telling me, so you want to digitalize maps. So tell me, how big is the map market today? We're talking paper maps. And it was about 400 million worth of paper map sold worldwide. The reaction was then too small for us, not interested. The reality, 15 years later, is that the market for digital maps is probably in the 100 billion range. When I left the space, it was about 60. So the whole concept of too small, of the market you're trying to replace is too small to bother, is usually the wrong way to look at it. I mean, the most famous example in this regard is Airbnb. how big is the market of people sleeping on other people's couches? Obviously, there was no market. But what people didn't see at the time is that Airbnb was actually being an alternative to the hotel industry. So we ended up in 2006 selling our company to Nokia. This is a company that now is called Here, which still deal with digital maps and navigation, and a company that has been bought by the German car industry in an effort to get more software know-how, to fight for independence against Apple and Google in that space. I had some very happy years at Nokia. Nokia at the time, you may not know, but was a formidable company. They owned about 60% or 70% market share of all things mobile. I mean, if they would still be in that position, you would be talking about a 500 billion company, because this is at least what it would be worth today to dominate the mobile world. Nokia was also a very open company with a very strong culture of innovation. And the lesson that I learned while at Nokia, where we had a very good time, was that within a company, you don't always see the world changing around you. So while working for Nokia, our business unit grew from when we sold the company to 10 million to 800 million when I left 3 years ago. So we were very much in a good mood. But these was 3 years where Nokia probably missed a few steps, which meant they would miss the whole 500 billion I'm talking about, and miss the domination. Hello, André.
Hi, Christophe.
Miss the opportunity to dominate one of the most important market in the world. And one quick anecdote that that would stay with me for a long time, especially when people are talking about market research. Nokia had a very sophisticated unit doing market research around the world, and every year they would come and present their results. And every single year, one of their core results is that people didn't want touch phone. They didn't want smartphones. They wanted, phone they could use with one hand. So somehow, the Nokia market research, came up with a result that the organization wanted to believe in, that they were on the right track and there was nothing to worry about. And even 3 years after the iPhone was launched, the message from the top of the company is that there is nothing to worry about. And obviously there are other components of that competitive situation, but that was a very important lesson for me, is that innovation is always to some extent going to come from outside the enterprise, and that therefore it's actually very worth it sometimes to be a maverick against some giants, because the giants are sometimes hindered by their own DNA and their own culture to do the right things. And to me, to this day, it is actually a strong motivation to be active in supporting innovation from outside organization. So, moving to the third point, what I believe is hot today. What are the things that I'm working on? And if any one of you is working on something like that, please do approach us. They are obviously, coming back to the point of timing. There are certain areas that are ripe at certain time, meaning that there are certain industries that will be transformed when certain components are in place to make this happen. And usually that means software stack, infrastructure, willingness of the customer to adopt new behaviors, and in these windows there's an opportunity for new companies to emerge and to become a large enterprise themselves. I mean, one of these areas, in my opinion, today is digital health. healthcare is one of the biggest industry in the world. It's one of the most relevant industry. It is also an industry that is growing to become a problem for in most countries. I mean, notably the U.S. with the healthcare costs going through the roof, but everywhere in the world there are huge problems that need to be solved. There are two types of healthcare, digital healthcare company. Ones that where the patient takes more power in their hands. I mean, this is an example of Clue and a number of others. And then there are also a lot of opportunities in classical digital business model will certainly apply to digital health. So that's clearly one area. The second is what I call the future of work. And the future of work, I mean, this is we're here in the design thinking when they're thinking about how new ways to organize creativity and product development. I mean, there is no industry larger than work. This is clearly the one. If you can consider this an industry, this is the one industry that has the biggest volume. And clearly, computers are starting to become relevant to industries which in the past we would never have thought they would be relevant. And if you are a lawyer today, you have to consider the impact of artificial intelligence. If you are a doctor today, you have to consider the impact of augmented intelligence. So for me, the future of work, everything has to do with how to rethink the enterprise. I mean, if you consider the enterprise as an entity that is created in order to reduce transaction costs, then in a digital world, there are new ways to reduce transaction costs between workers. I mean, so for instance, a company like Slack, for me, would fall into the future of work category. So third hot area that I actually spent time thinking about is sustainability. And in my case, I look at sustainability and nutrition and food. And there's something to be said for founders working to change things for the benefit of humanity. It's interesting that whoever there are actually some very successful funds who already 20 years ago have started to invest in everything away from fossil fuel, because it was already clear 20 years ago that fossil fuel is going to create a problem for humanity, and that therefore there is a rationale to go in the other direction. And I think this is something that founders today are in a position to look into and look for problems that will be relevant in 15, 20 years. So the last one, and I know André is an expert, and we're talking about this a lot, is blockchain technology. And when I say blockchain technology, I mean distributed form of organization, and blockchain technology applied to new problems. And I must admit, if I was an active entrepreneur today, this is probably where I would spend my time, because there is something, when I started to get involved with the internet in the 90s, the vision was that you suddenly had a technology which would allow a different form of organization and a new distribution of power. That was what was promised. What came is actually centralization of power. And today, every time I see a startup that is somehow too close to either Amazon or Facebook, or this becomes very hard to back them, because you know that these companies are both very powerful and also very smart, and there is a bit of a vortex effect. That means that they are swallowing everything that is too close to their core business. And we understand also that what data, probably you understand better than most, what the role of data and the competitive advantage that having more data is giving to these companies, and make it very hard for others to compete with them. So in this context, I think that blockchain is a very interesting technology to spend time on. There are other stuff. We invested in robots and automotive cleaning vehicle, but these are few of the areas that I look into today. So maybe a last point, is what matters to a seed investor. So today I invest very early stage, mostly in an ID and a team. A team and a prototype, or MVP. And you don't have very much information when you do that. So it comes down to a few patterns. One is clearly team dynamic and motivation. We are a little bit different from many other investors in the sense that we also invest in teams that are not complete, meaning that we don't mind if there is like one piece missing, but there needs at least to be a common understanding what piece is missing in a team, and a willingness to spend time to complete a team. Team dynamics is one of the key reasons why startups fail. It is also one of the key reasons why startups succeed. I mean, in my personal experience with my mapping company, we were up against deep winds, and in the end, what allowed us to be somewhat successful was the fact that we had a very strong team dynamic. We simply didn't want to give up, and we were very, very strongly believers in digital maps as a great way to visualize a reality and do great things with. So that's one element. Maybe another element that I would say, especially technical entrepreneurs needs to get a good grip on is the core economics of what they're trying to solve. So we don't need to know the business model, but you need to know that whatever you do is going to have an exceptional impact on the space you're going after, and not just an incremental impact. Because this is what the power of a startup is, really to create a step change. So if you don't have a 10x improvement with your AI versus no AI, then it's going to be very hard to convince anyone to forget everything they've done in the past to try your methods. So I think this sense of unit economics and amount of disruption that you have in your concept is important. And then maybe the last point is, the probability of a company to grow to a large company to succeed, or rather the probability of a company to fail, is almost always the same. And it's independent of whether you've tried to do something big or you try to do something small. So it's absolutely not rational to try to do something small, because there is a false perception that if you go for something small, you have a higher probability to succeed. Unfortunately, and it's statistically proven, it's not the case. So it's absolutely important and fundamental to try to achieve something big. And the role of the investor is basically to share that projection in the future that the entrepreneur brings to the table. So that's a few points I can share. Maybe I'll let André follow on with. We have a very strong relationship, and having a good lawyer is a good start to do anything, and in particular having one that thinks like an entrepreneur. So.
Thank you very much. You don't want to do some Q&A or discussion in between before we dive into boring legal stuff?
Up to you. I mean, happy, but then we can answer together.
Okay, I can also try to find out how I get this presentation started. You said it's simply open. Not so open. There. Okay. Maybe a quick few words with regard to myself. My name is André. I'm very sorry that I came late here. I simply didn't have the map that you once created, so I couldn't find the spot so easily. I'm a partner with LACORE law firm. We are almost entirely focused on the startup and technology industry. That means 80% of our business and almost 95% of our time is invested into, or is actually spent with entrepreneurs and startups. Sometimes also investors like Christophe, but mostly we are representing founders. And the idea behind is that we actually really like to work with people that are trying to achieve something big. And as Christophe said, and that we thought we found on the founders' side in the past. And is my assumption correct that everybody is sitting here plans to build a startup one day? Who would? Okay, a few. Yeah. So what I thought, what we could talk about with regard to how to raise the first financing is what, as like a first-time entrepreneur, like from the legal and also from the commercial perspective, you need to focus on in order to avoid like early mistakes or early mishaps in your financing structure. Because what's very clear is, you set up your company, you're getting investors on board, you're giving away the first few percentages, whatever it is, and those percentages, A, will never come back, and second, to whatever structure you agree at that point, it will also be very, very difficult to change that structure. So that means that if you do mistakes in the first or in the initial phase, then it's very difficult to correct or to amend or even to improve this later, and therefore it's worth having some kind of understanding or some basic understanding at least what are the commercial and what are the important legal terms. And and the first thing that of course always comes to mind when you think about getting financing for your company is the valuation. Yeah, I mean that is what you read when you look into Deutsche Startups.de or Gründerszene or whatever. Everybody is bragging what valuation it has achieved or he has achieved when doing the last financing round. But the question is really, what does it mean? Yeah, because there is not only valuation, there are very, very different notions of valuation that is important to understand. Otherwise, you already lose your first percentage when doing the first steps. And I guess the most the most used terms with regard to that is the differentiation between the pre-money valuation and the post-money valuation. So pre-money valuation basically means you have your startup and you say the startup has a certain value of, let's say, 100. When you now get a financing in your startup of, let's say, 50, then the post-money valuation of your startup is not 100 anymore, but it is rather 100 plus the 50 that the investor puts in, and the post-money valuation is 150. So big question, what percentage would that investor getting when investing 50 into your startup that's worth 100? Any ideas? Yes, exactly. So your answer was 1/3. I was told I need to repeat everything, otherwise it's not on the video. So yeah, exactly. It is 1/3, and this sounds easy on first sight. But if you now think about having a number of investors, then the differentiation between the pre-money valuation and the post-money valuation suddenly becomes very important. Yeah. So what I mean with this is we take the same example. We have that investor. The investor says, okay, I want to invest 50 in your startup that's worth 100 pre-money, and therefore I'm getting 1/3. Yeah. That was your calculation, and the calculation was right, and you would agree to it. So now the next investor is coming in the same round because you want to have someone more, and that investor is investing 30. How much percentage would that person get? Any ideas?
Around 25%.
Around 25%, and that is why?
Because it's 30 of 130.
No, actually not. It is more. It is 30 out of 180. Yeah, because you have the pre-money valuation that was 100. You have the 50 from our first investor, so we are at 150. You have another 30 from the second investor, so you are at 180.
I thought you're deciding between one of the two.
Okay, now maybe then I wasn't clear, but let's go with this example. So we have the person that is investing 30 into your startup that now has a post-money valuation of 180, so he would get 1/6. So, but what about our first investor? We said he would get 1/3. Is that still true? It's not, because now he's getting 50 out of 180. So why I'm saying this, I'm not to appear, very smart and trying to pretend that as a lawyer I know something about math. I'm telling you that because it's how you structure your negotiations. Yeah? So you're talking to your first investor, and you should never commit on a post-money valuation, because once you have done that in our example here, and you have promised 1/3 to this investor, and then you're going to the second one, and the second one then getting, adding something on top, and you're giving them a 1/6 that would actually dilute the first one that got the 1/3. If you go back to that first one and said, hey, you know what, you're diluted now. You're not getting the 1/3 anymore. You're getting a little bit less. He will say, no, I mean, we said I get 1/3. Yeah? So suddenly, with this, you have lost percentages because indirectly, you have reduced your pre-money valuation to the benefit of this first investor without getting anything more. Yeah? It even means the more successful you are in fundraising, the more money you raise, it fires back on you because you're giving away more and more percentages and reducing your pre-money company valuation. So therefore, the basic rule is whenever you talk to someone, you never tell him how many percentages this person getting at the end. You only discuss pre-money valuation and whatever investment this person makes. Investors, of course, if they're smart, and lots of them are smart, they will ask what is the round size, and at some point you might commit to the maximum amount that you're going to fundraise in this round. But still, you should not, as a first rule, you should never commit on a post-money valuation, only on a pre-money valuation.
So the big question is whether you go sequentially or in parallel, right? Because in your original example, you were trying to do it sequentially, which is not so smart if you commit to a post-money valuation.
Oops, have I switched this off? No, okay. Well, I mean, first of all, going in parallel is probably rather impossible because you can never meet two investors at the same time. Yeah? So it will always be
negotiation, signing, not at the same time.
So it will always be kind of sequential. But even if you could, if you could meet one investor now and the other in half an hour or something like this, in practice it's not really happening, because what is happening in practice is that all the investors are shy, and they say, well, who is investing first? Yeah, that's the big problem of your first round. Yeah, you're talking to a lot of people. You're usually talking small tickets, like 50,000, 100, 250, and all these small investors will say, well, who does the lead? Who is the third 300,000 euro investor? And once that person is there, I will immediately follow. Yeah, this is the answer you will get again and again and again. Yeah. So, and that's the point, because you also need the small ones, because there is this one bigger guy that says, okay, I do the 300,000. Yeah, but I want to have like another 500 from smaller tickets. So you need the other one. So you need to drive the negotiations with them to kind of a conclusion. And the valuation is always the main point on which everybody is going to focus. It might be actually not the right point to focus on, but it is the point where everybody focuses on. And therefore, it is so easy to make mistakes at that point, because you are promising percentages to it. And then also in addition, it comes that these people, like these early stage and very early stage investors, people that even invest kind of before Christophe, like this friends and family angel, friend of a friend style, they all will easily tell you, pre-money, post-money, I don't understand. So tell me how much percentage I'm getting. And they're not bad. It's not bad intention. They do that because they want to have an understanding. But still, when you come back, they will claim their percentage that you promised, and then you lose on this. The second, big term with regard to valuation is the non-diluted or the fully diluted approach. Anybody of you ever heard that term before? Okay, so it means that now maybe we need to go one step back. So you have your company. Let's say it's a German GmbH. Let's assume it has 10,000 shares. Yeah, that is not entirely correct. A GmbH always has at least 25,000 shares, but so that it still works with my math, we do the 10,000 shares. So you have 10,000 shares, and now we have this one investor. In my example, the one investor would invest 50 on a valuation of 100. So he's getting a third of the shares. How does it work actually? Is someone transferring the shares, or how does this investor get the shares? Any idea? So it is never happening, and a financing round is never happening through a transfer of shares. Yeah? So it's never happening that an existing shareholder transfers the shares to an investor. It is always that the company issues new shares that comes on top. Yeah? So in my example, we said we have 10,000 shares in the GmbH, and now there's this investor coming and getting a third of the shares. So the company is issuing another 5,000 shares, and the investor is getting those 5,000. So there is, as I said, there is never a transfer from existing shares to existing shareholders to the new investor for purpose of company financing. Yeah. Of course, later it might happen that you sell some shares, so that you can, make some money yourself. But if the purpose of the financing round is financing the company, then it is always the company issuing the shares and getting the money. Makes also a lot of sense. Yeah? Company gives the shares, gets the money. So very clean transaction. Okay, so in this example, it's very easy. As we said, we have 10,000 shares. We have a 100 valuation. Somebody gives 5,000 new shares. All good. But now imagine your company is already a little bit advanced, or you had early on, friends that are working for you, or team members, or whatever, and you have promised these people some so-called incentive program. Yeah, you have promised them, for example, options or virtual shares, maybe terms you have heard before. That basically means they do not get shares in the company yet, but they have an option that if the company one day exits, they participate in the proceeds of this exit as if they were shareholders. Yeah? So they have in the good old days of the Neue Markt, one called that shadow shares or black shares or something like that. So they're not really on the cap table, but they are like on an extra cap table. They're virtually participating in the company. Okay, so let's assume you have given you have given 2,000 of these virtual shares to your best friends who are working for you in this company. So we have 10,000 shares that the founders are holding, and we have 2,000 shares that are held by the team. Okay, so now the investor coming again in, and he wants to have a third of the company. So I mean, if you assume what's going to be the basis, is it the 10,000 shares, or is it the 10,000 plus the 2,000 that has been promised to the team? Then I guess the answer is pretty straightforward. It's going to be the 10 plus 2, because in exit, these two will participate in the proceeds, so the investor takes that into account. It also, it also sounds fair, because these shares, although not existing on the cap table, but they still go away to the team members at some point. So it's fair to take them into account. Taking them into account, in addition to the real shares, that's called a fully diluted valuation. Yeah? So an investor who is kind of sophisticated will always tell you the valuation of your company is X million pre-money, fully diluted. And what he wants to tell you with this is that he includes any options, whatever convertible bonds and other fancy stuff that you might issued in addition to the shares. So the tricky part comes when this investor tells you, okay, your company is worth $10 million pre-money, fully diluted, and with a non-assigned employees pool of 10%. Yeah. So suddenly there is a new factor in our equation, and that is the non-assigned pool. So we go back to my example that I made, and I said you have given 2,000 shares to your friends through some options and some virtual shares. So all fine. But when the investor is talking about a non-assigned employees pool of 10%, then he means that you create 10% of new shares that are yet assigned to nobody, that are kind of sitting and waiting in some shelf, and that are going to be assigned to the employees someday in the future, or maybe not. Yeah. So in fact, what he is doing is he's taking care that you are taking care for your employees and your team members, so that you create this nice little incentive pool, but at the same time, he's effectively reducing your valuation by 10%. And what he's telling you basically is he's telling you, okay, there is this team, you need to incentivize the team, but that's your problem and I don't pay for it. So is that an efficient and fair approach? I think it depends. Yeah? And it very much depends on what Christophe said before, when he said, we are investing into teams even if the teams are incomplete. So if your team is incomplete, if there is like a key member missing, then it's clear that getting this team member on board and also incentivizing this team member, that is your problem or your task as a founder. Yeah, the investor might help you with this, but I mean, you as a founder, you are responsible for having a complete team. So if there are shares needed for that additional team member, then indeed it should reduce your portion and not the portion of the investor that's investing into you. However, you always need to make sure that the investor is not using this argument twice. Yeah? So if the investor is telling you, well, it would be 10 million euro pre, but because your team is incomplete, it's only 7 million, and in addition to this, you have a 10% non-assigned pool to get that new team member on board, then this was the same argument used twice. This you should try to avoid, of course. However, if your team is complete, and maybe you're at later stage, you're already up and running, you have a complete team of key members, you have a more or less complete team of second row or second tier team members, and everything is nice, and you're getting some additional financing for growth, then the bargaining situation becomes a little bit different. And I think what the current market standard is that that half of the non-assigned pool is on your account, and the other half is shared with the investor on a pro rata basis. And I think that's a fair approach. Any questions so far? No? Yes.
How can you decide how large the non-assigned pool will be?
Well, it's as I said, when the investor is using this to reduce its valuation, then it's bargaining with him, and the investor has an incentive to make this pool as big as possible. But of course, most investors are they're not evil. I mean, they realize that it's a joint venture that they're entering into with you. I mean, the moment they have wired the money, there are only very few people that can earn that money back, and that's basically you and your two friends. Yeah. So screwing a founder makes no sense for an investor, and that I would say 9 out of 10, if not more, investors know that, and it's really rarely that we see transactions in which investors really try to screw founders, and we probably do 1 or 2 financing transactions per week. Yeah, so it is really it's really a lot. However, but of course it's always about making the most profit. So within reason, he will try to make that pool as big as possible. And the market standard is actually a 10% pool. So 10% non-assigned, 15% with a partly assigned pool. But I think 10% is a good number, and one should not easily agree on a higher or on a bigger pool, unless there's maybe a situation where for whatever reason, you need a lot of people, or you need people that are like super experts in an area, and it's difficult to get and something like this. But basically, it's 10%. Mm-hmm.
What happens if the whole investment is already over and there's no ESOP reserve, and one team member wants options after that? What happens then?
Yeah, I mean, then this is a situation where you need to change the structure, and you need to build in the pool. And it can actually be, tactically a smart move to kind of convince the investor having a small pool, or maybe even no pool at all, and then the transaction is done, and then this person is coming, and then the person asks for options, and then we all have to create a pool together now. This is you can try that, but this is also screwing the investor, and you also better don't do that. It is really as a joint venture, so one should discuss it, and one should argue about it. And one good arguing for bearing the pool as a founder is that one says, okay, I mean, if we don't have the pool, then we need to pay these guys much higher salary. And if we would pay them higher salary, then this is also coming from all of us, because it's the company's money. So for that reason, it might make sense also to bear the pool on a pro rata basis. But as I said, the market standard today in early rounds, like Christophe is doing, like seed, and also in the following round, which is A, is that there is a pool up to 10% that is on the account of the founders. And then later the whole scheme changes a little bit, and it's getting more and more towards a pro rata with regard to all shareholders.
But interestingly, when an American investor comes in, they insist for 15%. So there is a delta there, and it can be a very wise move on the side of the founder to have a larger pool, because in the end, what you're getting are people that you would properly incentivize, I mean aligned with your incentive, that can make the difference between having a average company and a huge success. Because that's one thing that sometimes founders and investors in Europe tend to underestimate is how important your first 20 hires are, and how crucial it is for everyone involved to get people even better than you are, you meaning the founder who had the idea, the initiative. And one of the key qualities of top-notch founders is the ability to hire people who are either more experienced or more specialized than they are themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And whether it's 10% or 15%, I think that is debatable. What I think is important, when you decide how big the pool is and how you use it for, are basically, I'd say, one crucial question. The question is, do you need to use the pool because you are not paying market standard salary? That's very often happening. As a startup, of course, early stage, you don't have sufficient cash, so you're really falling short of what someone else could earn if he would just go to McKinsey or something. Or are you using it more to create loyalty and to align incentives with the company and the founders. So why is that important? Because if you are out for creating loyalty and aligning interests, then one needs to know that like small portions of ESOP, of options, and that is one, yeah, I think it's now even like scientifically proven, almost do not have an effect on the decision of an employee to stay or to leave the company. Yeah? So I mean, if I give someone like 0.4% in the company and everybody knows that there are still 7 years to go before the whole thing's gonna make an exit, which, if at all, you know, which with you know, a lot of things that can happen, it can go bankrupt, or there are so-called down routes, huge dilution, and so on and so forth. And then taking into account that everybody has a future discount factor, it almost doesn't matter for this person whether it has 0.4% or nothing. If he or she decides to go to some other startup. Yeah, so for that reason, it makes much more sense to focus on like the key people, you know, like the people that are better than you are, more experienced, whatever, have done this 10 times before, and give them rather bigger portions of ESOP, so that they feel it, yeah? And that it becomes like a real value for them, and what reduce the number of people benefiting from it, you know, like from all to just a few. That's a big change in the approach towards these ESOP programs. It was for a very long time, you know, a lot of people believed, including me, that everybody should have ESOP in the company, whoever it is. But now it turns out that the effect is almost zero, and it's much more efficient and effective to give only a few people ESOP, but a bigger portion. Yep.
What's the standard vesting period you see on the deals you're making?
I would like to have one topic before, and no, it's totally fine, and then discuss that in a little bit of a broader concept, because there is not only ESOP, but there is also, well, this is very difficult here for me. There's also founders reverse vesting, and that goes into what you just said. Yeah. So when you assign ESOP to someone, yeah, like you give these options to like the first, you know, super cool employees that you're having, your interest usually is not to give them the 100 options that you have promised to one person, yeah, that you give it today. Because you want to incentivize this person that he or she works for you like for a longer period, yeah, the so-called vesting period. I'm going to explain in a minute what that is. Yeah, so you want this person maybe to make sure that he or she at least works for you for 4 years. Yeah. So what you would do is you would say, okay, I give you 100 options, but you're getting the option like only in monthly installments. Yeah? Only when you are like the end of the month, we check, are you still here? Okay, cool. Then you're getting some options. But if you leave, then you maybe can keep the options that I gave to you in the past, but of course I will not give you the rest. Yeah? So that's the incentive model. And the funny thing is, and that didn't exist like in, I don't know, 2010 or so. But that has become standard over the last 5 years, that also founders need to make themselves subject to this same or similar kind of scheme. And one can say statistically that, you know, when in my office 3 founders coming and say we're going to set up a company, I can predict, yeah, that in 80% of the cases in 3 years they're not sitting there anymore. I mean, either they bankrupt, or one of them has left because he thought that whatever, you know, Mallorca is also a nice place to live, or the other 2 are you know, don't like him anymore for whatever reason, or he or she is underperforming or whatever. Yeah, so there's a super high likelihood that within the team that there's going to be tension at some point. Yeah, sometimes they're like big fights. Sometimes is everybody sitting together and, you know, and agreeing that this is not the right way to spend the time, but that there is an issue, there's a very, very high likelihood. And then the point is, so I mean, if that person would say, okay, I'm off, yeah, I'm in Mallorca, maybe you can call me from time to time and tell me what's happening, yeah, then this is a very bad situation, yeah, because that person might still own a very substantial part of the company, and if he's gone, then this is for you as the people that stay is a double dip, yeah. You're losing someone who, you know, might still have contributed, and second, these shares are kind of gone, yeah? And you need someone to replace him, and this person that's replacing him, that needs to be on eye level with you, because you need a third co-founder now, so that person also wants to have a lot of shares. And the investor will say, no, I mean, I invested in you as a team, yeah, so that's your problem. Yeah, the other guy on Mallorca says, well, I'm on Mallorca, so what can I do? Yeah, so the shares are coming. So the shares are coming from the people that are, you know, that are left behind. Yeah. And to overcome it, you know, this mechanism of founders reverse vesting has been invented. Yeah, and it simply means the same as I explained with regard to the employees' options also applies with regard to you as a founder. So you have, let's say, a 4 years period. If you leave after 2 years, you need to return half of your shares to the company, and so that the company can use it for someone who is replacing.
I've seen companies being destroyed by this type of negative dynamics, where people they had a fight, and then there's this other person that still hold a large portion of the share, which is an outsider to the company, and it's very toxic. And so really it is an interest of everyone involved to have as strict as possible reverse vesting. And we have this discussion because it's a bit counterintuitive. People think it's the investor wanting to force this into the company, but it's really for the benefit of the team. But again, it's like in a divorce. You know, at this time, it's a bit hard to tell them that they're not going to be together forever. So I would go for 5 years reverse vesting anytime if I would create a company now, because it's a time it takes usually,
yeah.
and it's good for the company, therefore for everyone.
Yeah, indeed, I really agree. Yeah? It makes a lot of sense to have the vesting period for you as a founder to make that longer. Yeah? Not only 4 years, yeah, which is, to answer your question, is the regular vesting period you see for employees. Yeah? I mean, for founders, I would do it even like 5 years or 6 years. And also, it doesn't matter so much how long it is. Why not? Because if it's shorter, you know, in next financing rounds, investors will always make their investment commitment conditioned upon you putting shares that are already vested, you know, back on the table. Yeah? So they will not. It's not that after 4 years you're getting a financing round and the investor says, "Oh, you're fully vested. Okay, cool. Here's the money." He will always say, "Well, 50% of your shares that are already vested, they're gonna deemed unvested before I do my investment." Yes.
Just to get this right, so one part of the vesting is investors telling you, we want you to vest for 3, 4, whatever years. But what you're saying is, if I get it right, that we as founders also decide up front when we found the company, yeah, that all our shares are vested for a period of.
Exactly. So I mean, it's you know, people coming to me and they don't have an investor, or they do it with their own money for like a little bit, or they have some uncle or whoever who is doing this, yeah. And nobody is requesting that founders vesting, yeah, because it's friends and family investing. And still, we always recommend, no, you should already today talk about this, to manage your expectation and have that mechanism built in. Yeah? It's better for you because it's always easier to find the right mechanism that fits to you when everybody is still in love with each other. And secondly, you're also indicating to your later investor that you have thought about it. Yeah? So it indicates a higher level of professionalism. So that is therefore one really should do this. And the question, and that is what I wanted to talk about, is not so much the vesting period, whether it's 4 years or 5 years or something. And even if you have an early exit, after 2 years, you always have something that's called accelerated vesting. Yeah? So you never lose on an early exit. Yeah? You're always deemed 100% vested. That's in Germany. It's almost impossible to do it differently. But that's too much legal detail. So it's not so much the term. The question is more, what is a lever event, yeah? and what is the effect of it? So we had, easy cases are, there's one founder that is putting all computers on fire and telling the business secrets to the competitor. So I mean, you can simply fire that person for cause, as it's called, and he's clearly a bad leaver. And probably one would say, okay, that person should lose all his shares, regardless what he did before. Because I mean, why would you give someone exit proceeds that have committed a crime to you, or something that's almost a crime? Okay, so that's pretty easy. So then the next case is already a little bit difficult. So what is with that person that goes after 2 years to Mallorca? Is that person keeping shares? Because he or she already worked like 2 years for the company, or could one say, well, but I mean, you didn't go the full, you didn't run the full mile, and it's a risk that you control. So if you leave, you're also losing everything. That seems a little bit unfair, because I mean there was clearly some contribution, and one needs to be have a little bit of so-called transaction intelligence here and find some smart solutions. So one could, for example, say, okay, we have a certain period that everybody needs to do. That's very often referred to as the cliff period. Market standard is 12 months. So who leaves in the first 12 months loses everything, even if it's after the 11th month. Then later one would say, no, okay, there is part at least is earned, but maybe for the remaining vested shares there is a call option, so that the company can buy back those shares on a maybe discounted valuation. And then maybe if there are another 3 or 4 years are down the road, you would have people simply keeping the shares that are vested. So, but really tricky case is let's assume you are 3 people, and nobody of you would like to go to Mallorca. Everybody really likes it, but the point is that 2 out of the 3 somehow have the feeling that the third person is not really contributing. I mean, all the ideas that person if any, is making in the partners meeting or whatever that is called, or in the board meeting, they're not even discussed because they are ridiculously, lame and so on and so forth. So what's happening then? I mean, can this person be kicked out or not? And here one needs to say that that really the environment has changed. That for very, very long it was impossible. You would always say, no, that can be misused. There can be strategic behavior and things like that. So nobody can be kicked out. It's even better than getting married. There's no divorce. Okay, so I mean, as with regard to marriage, divorce has at some point been invented. So also here one has realized that it's happening like too often. That there is, for some reason, an underperformer. But on the other hand, of course, one also needs to make sure that no one is misusing this, and is as I said, is applying strategic behavior. Because one could also think, okay, if that person is out and we're getting all the shares back, then we suddenly have a third of the company more in shares, and maybe we somehow manage it. And if then there is an exit, then this is really cool for us. So that one makes a windfall profit, strategic behaviors, all these fancy terms. How can you avoid that? And how can you also avoid that the power to kick that person out at some point, when you have more external shareholders on board, like investors, like that power is somehow in the hands of the investors, which might think that at a later point in time, the founder spirit is not so much required anymore. It becomes more like a manager exercise, and that it's better to get that founder out, get the shares, hire someone who is a McKinsey dropout, and this person, is happy that it doesn't need to fly around all the time anymore. So he's happier with, a fewer number of shares, and then the investor is making a windfall.
Let me say that case is widely overblown. I mean, there's nothing worse for an investor than having to change a management team. The risk involved is actually very high. So the ideal scenario is the founders will grow into world-class manager. That's always what you will try to do. And if there is a necessity to adjust that, it would be reluctantly. And
I don't know. I mean, I need to. I mean, that's that's. I wanted to make clear that we have founders DNA. Also, I came with Christophe here. So no, I disagree actually, because it is. I think everybody has realized that nobody or that very few people are a second, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. Yeah, I mean, people that are sitting in a garage today, and garage is not so much the case anymore. So in an incubator today, and founding their company, they're probably not the right people running a 300, 400, or 1,000 employees.
But then a change is justified. You're making my point.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm not. Just wait my second sentence. But the point is rather who has the leverage, yeah? I think it is much better. It is much better to discuss, changing the management into, some, more an execution-driven person from the improvising early stage founder, if not one group of the shareholders has the power to structure that the way they would like to have it. Yeah. So for that reason, I think one needs to, and it's not that I fundamentally disagree with what Christophe was just saying. I just think one needs to establish something that is, that creates a balance of power. Yeah. So for example, one would say, if you have 3 founders, that if 2 think that the one is maybe not the right person anymore, then they indeed can vote this person out. Maybe, with probably in order to avoid any kind of kindergarten situation, you would also, in addition, need the simple majority of the investors' shares. Yeah? So then you have a pretty broad majority that believes that that person is maybe not the right one anymore at the position he or she has at the moment, and that has I think has a high likelihood that it is that's actually a true view or correct view on it. And then you can also mitigate the risk that there is strategic behavior where you would say, okay, if someone is kind of voted out, then in addition to the shares that are vested, this person maybe would get another 3 months deemed vested or something like this. Yeah, so that you have a small compensation that avoids misusing this mechanism. And that I think is the learning from the last years. One needs to face reality that there is a high chance that you will not only encounter the situation where someone is leaving, but you're also encountering the situation where one of the team members is not the right fit, and one should rather take care of this today than when the situation materializes. Yeah.
Under which circumstances are founders allowed to use these tools, like voting out? Because I mean, if it's a team of 3 people, can be easily that 2 build a bond and say, okay, we want to.
No, of course, but one shouldn't. Yeah, but of course one shouldn't underestimate that they initially thought that they are the right team. Yeah, so there must be a change of mind, and it's true what Christophe is saying. It is really rarely happening that this is done. In particular in founders teams, only because they can. If you have thought at the beginning that 3 people are the right, then it really is a change of mind, and that has been triggered by something. And one also always needs to know that if you have a team and someone is key, and you replace that person, then this is also an issue for future financing rounds, because the investor will ask, okay, what happened there? And so that person is gone. What is the replacement? Yeah? And that's often very difficult to answer.
But the legal, is it limited legally?
Sorry, that you meant. No, it's all statutory law doesn't help you at all. It's all subject to contract. Yeah? So you would sit down and either take some standardized solution in your agreement, or you would tailor-made it for you, and then you would think it through, and then you can basically write down whatever you want and can be creative as much as you like. And and if you have legal advice or a business angel, whoever who has experience in that industry, then with this person together, you would maybe model a couple of situations. That's typically occur, and then you would decide how to handle this, and you would write this down in the agreement, and that's how it works. There was a second question? Oh.
Yeah, would you like try to agree on this beforehand? So in the initial founding of the company to say, in case somebody is underperforming, we would use this kind of method to...
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You should do that on day one.
Then that question would be redundant because everybody has agreed in the contract to how we will do it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I mean, then the legal question is gone for the fear of being mistreated because you've agreed to the method that's going to be used.
Yeah. So okay. So you were saying when there is an agreement like before the company is founded or at the moment when it is founded, then there is no chance that it could be misused. I mean, I don't know, because I mean the moment you were agreeing to this, you probably think it will not be you who's going to be voted out. But I think you need to run a little bit the risk of that such a structure is misused for the benefit of the company, because if you apply some game theory on it and you think, okay, what is the right solution, then since you don't know whether you are the out or the underperformer, you would always think from the perspective of the company, and the company would like to have the underperformers out because it increases its value, and therefore that's going to result in more to share, and if there is more to share, then there are always solutions possible that everybody is at least well off with. Yeah.
Also, I think it's hard to define what does underperforming mean. I mean, this is already a subjective thing, so you cannot. When you found a company, it's hard to put down some measures that define what is underperforming. What does it mean?
Yeah, sure, but I can say if we're 3 people that everybody's fine with 2 of them deciding this.
Yeah.
So then I know already it could be that one day 2 people say I'm underperforming, and I've agreed to this. So I think that's more or less fair.
No, absolutely. And what is really important is that as a startup company, you cannot run the risk to have any kind of lawsuit within the shareholders or among the shareholders. Yeah, that's you're dead. Yeah. So I mean, in my law firm, we have simply closed down the litigation department because it really doesn't make any sense. Yeah. The moment you're having lawsuits, the whole thing is dead. Yeah. Nobody's going to invest into you anymore. I mean, if the landlord is suing you for whatever renovation, doesn't matter. But I mean, if you have a lawsuit among the founders, that's the end of it. And for that reason, it is important that you only have like mechanisms that are based on a binary formula. Yeah, so you have 2 people voting that the third person is underperforming, then it is like this. Yeah, there should never be a criteria. If someone is underperforming, then we can vote. Yeah, because then whether someone is underperforming or not, I mean, how should Landgericht Berlin or even Potsdam decide that? Yeah, I mean, there's no way for them to decide that. Yeah, so for that reason, you need to have like commercial or economic regulating mechanisms around it, that people are not incentivized to do something like an adverse selection and vote you out, although you are contributing. And that is, for example, you keep your vested shares. Maybe there is some additional, 3 months compensation or something, so that there is a little bit of a downside. And then if everybody is, understands that it comes with huge externalities if you kick out a founder because you need to explain that to your next round's investors, then I think you are in the green.
I mean, these market standards that André is developing here actually, it's very important to spend time to understand why you do this. But there's an overarching point, which is that no company has ever become successful because it has a great contract, and that in my so it's
no, it's the other way around.
That in my experience, just as it is impossible for us to save a company failing on the basis of the contract we have made with the founders, in my experience, it's also the case that founders who try, there's a negative correlation, and I'm sure you can support my point, between founders who spend too much time optimizing legal position and success.
No, totally, absolutely. I mean, you need, with everything, in particular at the beginning, it doesn't make sense to optimize language in your first shareholders agreement because you're going to have 5 on your way up, and they're going to replace everything before. Yeah? So, indeed, optimizing on the detail is not important. But what's important is understand these mechanisms and find the right one that that works for you, and that takes into account that it needs to be not super complex, but rather easy to apply. It needs to be quick. There shouldn't be too many question marks around the language and things like that. So the tendency that actually coming from the US, tendency to have like 100 pages shareholders agreements that at the moment you're establishing your company also giving you the mechanism how to IPO it. You don't need that. Yeah, I mean, why would you think about an IPO that's 10 years down the road, if any? So it's more important to be like short and crisp and sharp, and think about these like very important situations in your life as a startup founder. And that, funny as it is the moment you leave. Yeah. So how to deal with leaver situation, deal with exit situations. That's the only thing that is important. And then and you need to think it through. You need to understand it, and then I think you have a good basis. So I don't know. Time is up, I think, unfortunately.
We're here. You're here. So if more questions.
No, I mean, of course, but I don't think it makes so much sense to start another chapter. So, but I don't know. But for questions, of course, and discussions, I'm happy if there is anything. Yeah.
So for later investment rounds, I heard that there's this instrument that founders are given shares that they can cash out as part of the new investment, basically giving them a glimpse of a possible exit, but keeping them still engaged. How common is that in the European market?
Yeah, so that is, I mean, that is, I was touching this a little bit when I said, okay, there's a financing round, so the company is issuing new shares, and then it's getting cash for it. So that's the so-called primary transaction. What you are referring is a secondary transaction. That means existing shareholders are selling shares to an investor that's coming into the company as a new shareholder, as a new investor. And of course, these shares are purchased by this investor. So the purchase price goes to that person that's selling. That can be like a business angel that after a couple of years wants to leave and liquidate the position. Sometimes it's also founders. So I think it's common that you see secondary transaction, but you see them late. Yeah? You see them in B rounds. Yeah? And I think there is a good reason. There's a good reason for it, because one needs to say that at that point. Value is created every day. There is no question about it. Yeah, and I mean, I'm advising companies that are that have a value of 100 million, 200, or even 300 million euros or more. But one should not close the eyes towards reality, and that is that if something goes wrong, the value can drop again to 0 or less. So so for that reason. Everything should always kind of follow the principle. We go into this together, we go out of that together. Yeah? So we need to stay one team. Everybody should be aligned. This said, of course, after working for a startup 24/7 for a couple of years, on a probably not very high salary, there at some point there might be some need. Whatever you want to buy yourself an apartment or something, and that is often appreciated by the investors, and then they allow and even enable those secondary transactions. But
it is happening in C round usually, and it's actually very healthy. It is to mitigate.
It's healthy or not healthy?
It is healthy. It is to mitigate the temptation on the side of the founder to sell too early. So in a sense, so if someone comes in at a high valuation, still wants 10x. So someone has to carry, the next 5 years in order to get this 10x, and in order to to make sure that the founder is aligned, it could be useful to have him do a secondary.
Yeah. So maybe it's happening in C. Sometimes one sees it also in B. I think in B it's usually smaller. In C, round is maybe like a little bit bigger size. What Christophe was just referring to, because it's a different intention behind it, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's common. Yeah.
How would you estimate the value of a company before the investment?
Well, that's of course big. It's a big question that is actually almost non-solvable. Yeah, because I mean when you do a seed investment today, yeah, in the Berlin market, you see a spread from 1.5 million euro pre to like 3 million euro. Sometimes you see 5 million euro pre-million, but that's just really rare exceptions. But I mean, the truth is that if you would, take that company like on the market the next day, nobody would pay you even 100,000 for it. Yeah. So it's kind of not a real value, and that's the reason why some people, that are working in the vegetable industry start laughing that a company should be like worth 30 million euro, although there are just 5 people sitting around a couple of laptops. Yeah. And therefore, it is not really value what we're talking about. Yeah, it is more a calculation like from it's more a calculation from the cap tables point of view. Yeah, so you would assume, okay, how much money do I need in the life circle of my startup? How many financing rounds am I doing? And then you would assume that for each financing round you would give away 20% roughly. And then there might be a bridge in between, and then still you need to have at the end of this life circle, you still need to have a sufficient number of shares in the hand of the founders that they are efficiently incentivized, because otherwise nobody would invest anymore. And then based on this, you are determining what is the right value for your first stage investment.
Generally, I mean, founders tend to spend a lot of time thinking about that. The more important question is whom do you want to do business with for the next 10 years? So that is really something that is often forgotten, is that it is very much a long-term partnership. There's almost no way to get out of your way. So at least as important is the question of whom do you partner with.
Absolutely, and I mean to do due diligence on your investor is, I mean, usually nobody does it. Yeah? The investor is coming, in particular later stage, they spend 3-4 weeks or whatever doing due diligence, making like a big data room and all this kind of stuff, and it takes a lot of time and effort and money also. But the companies are very often not doing really due diligence on their investors, but they should, yeah, because these persons are in, you need to live with them, and a lot of investors, they're bringing additional value, whatever. They have a network. They have been entrepreneurs before, so they know better how you feel in certain situations, and also needs to like these people actually, because you're really bringing a lot of time with, you're really spending a lot of time with them. Yeah, so for that reason, it makes a lot of sense to not only make your choice based on the valuation, but also really based on the investor that is applying to invest in your company. Yeah.
Would you recommend to dive into the legal stuff as a founder by myself? So that's the point, to get a lawyer into the situation, and how far can I go by my own and learn all the legal stuff on my own?
Well, I mean, it's of course always better to have a lawyer, and you should always have like a big position for this in your budget. No, I think what is important is, I mean, there is something that will be difficult for you to catch up with, yeah, and that is, I mean, for you it's probably your first investment, your first investment round, maybe your second or your third, yeah. So, and if you have someone experienced in that space, and it does not necessarily need to be a lawyer, it can also be like a business angel or something like this, but someone like this who had done, all these transactions before. That's the real value. Yeah? In particular, in early stages, these agreements, they do not look so different. Yeah? But for example, I mean, as I said, we are doing like at least 2 financing rounds per week. Yeah, and we are representing more than 300 startups in Berlin, mainly in Berlin, from any stage, yeah, from like flying cars to people that just establishing their company. And when you show me a term sheet or an offer, I can immediately tell you whether this term sheet is in the market or outside the market. And then I can help you come to a conclusion, not by by a buying or not conclusion also to an agreement, not by just applying like bazaar mentality and saying, okay, that person offers like 1.5 million valuation, we want to have 3, so whatever, let's, we say 3, and then you somewhere, meet in the middle. But also, with regard to other transactions that we've seen before, we can offer maybe smart solutions that brings you closer to your investor. So my point is, it doesn't make sense to dive into this deeply. It is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it took me like 6-7 years at university to get that stuff. Other people that are smarter might make it in a year, but still, I mean, it's a little bit difficult to get there. It's also inefficiently spent time, but you should also, in particular at the beginning, not overpay those services. It's really important to spend that money wisely and efficiently. And the lawyer that that would tell you for your first AGB, I want to have 20,000 euro, 10 or 15,000 euro. It doesn't make any sense, yeah, because you're putting out your AGB for a business model that you're going to change 5 times at least in the future. Yeah, so you need to have something that somehow works. Yeah, so pragmatic approach is very important.
Does your firm also represent investors?
Well, just a few. We only represent investors that we think are founder friendly, and otherwise we do not accept them.
So my question is, isn't there like often a conflict of interest? Because if you represent my firm and then it happens that Christophe's on the other side of the table, we in the end have different, I mean, we try to work together, but there might be different interests. So
no, of course.
Who does the...
Yeah, so for that reason, we actually mainly represent only very late stage investors, investors that coming in C round or D round or B plus or something like this, or investors that coming in like very, very early stage, like Christophe, for example, does it, or Frank Thelen, or so, who we also represent. So why is that the case? Because at that point we think that the issues at stake are or issues on the table are so kind of easily to identify and to find good solutions that work for everybody. So we assume a role that in the US is called a counsel to the deal. Yeah? So indeed, we would not represent you. We would also not represent Christophe, but we would moderate the process and would help both of you getting to a solution. And we would try that there are no loopholes. Yeah? So we would not try to trick one of you with with some fancy legal language stuff, but we would simply try to make an agreement that exactly reflects what has been commercially agreed. And in early stage, that's very well possible. For that reason, I would say 8 out of 10 startups agree to that concept, because it also saves costs dramatically. Like I would say 60% of cost is saved by an approach like this. But in later stage, when the whole thing gets more complicated, when you also might have certain issues in due diligence that the investor has found, it doesn't work anymore. And that is why we don't represent A round, B and B round investors.
In the very beginning, we try to minimize as much lawyer time, because there is, to be fair, in my opinion, there is very little legal discussion required. This discussion about the founders vesting is one to have at a high level, and after that, contracts tend to be relatively standard and usually not something we spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, indeed. It's very standardized, and one needs to understand certain stuff. But in particular, if you have an investor that is inside the market, there is not so much to amend, change, or improve, because it would look like it, with any other investor. But still, I mean, it's nevertheless it's a valid concern. If one doesn't feel comfortable with this setup, then one shouldn't do it, because I really think it's important to to feel very comfortable with the advisors. And I'm proud to say that a lot of companies that started with us when they were established, they were still with us when they exited, or when they got insolvent. I mean, we simply hold hands until the happy days or the end of it. Yeah.
You've talked a lot about these different rounds, and first there's seed and then A, B, B plus. What is really the meaning of these names, or why don't you call B plus C? Or?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. That's a very valid question. Also, I mean, so basically it is. It's the names of these financing rounds that have somehow been established. Yeah? And one says there's an angel round, there is a pre-seed round, there is a seed round, then there is A, B, C, and D, E, F, whatever. It goes on forever. Hopefully not. And sometimes it's not that all these rounds are necessarily happening. Yeah? So for example, if you have an angel round, you can then also have a seed round immediately after, and there's no pre-seed in between. Yeah? But these are the terms that you can read about and Google. And when I say an A plus or B plus, then I mean it's an extension of an already of an A round that already has happened, and maybe it's a little bit too small that it would be called a B round. But one also needs to say, I mean, there is no rocket science behind it. It is, and it's differently used here in Berlin than it is used in Silicon Valley, for example, where the rounds are much bigger. So when you are meeting some Silicon Valley entrepreneur and you proudly tell him that you just finished your A round, then you might have cashed in 2 million euro, and he thinks that you're a really cool guy who just have cashed in 20 million euro. Yeah. So it's a different world, clearly. Yeah.
I have no background in entrepreneurship, but got curious since apparently commented at HBI. So I was trying to understand that a bit better, and the numbers you get from Silicon Valley are quite different. So you just mentioned that. So maybe you can attach a few numbers to different rounds and how long they are supposed to last. And what's the meaning of a low salary?
I would refer to Christophe here. He's still flying to America. I'm not going there anymore.
Berlin. Don't talk about Silicon Valley. Talk about Berlin.
No, but I mean, I still think we both in this. So I would say that that a proper round should last 12 months, because it usually takes you 6 months to build the next one, and you cannot be in fundraising mode all the time. And of course, this is more difficult to achieve with earlier rounds than it is with later rounds, but that is a good guideline. So, and the seed investment is usually something depending on the industry, a little bit between 250 and 500,000 euros. Would you agree? No. So and then after seed you have your A round, and A round it tends to be like 2 to 3 million euro, I'd say. Well, and then you have the B round, and the B round then is 7 to 10 million euro.
This already determines the growth, right? Because this takes place every year, and this is exactly the growth rate.
Yes.
So you have a fixed growth rate in your standard startup. That's quite odd.
No, but it depends. It also, as I said, it depends a little bit on the industry. And I mean, you might have read about these flying cars that I were mentioning. I mean, they get in an A round, they got $90 million. I mean, that was even published in Handelsblatt. But this is an exception.
There is no standard, and there is also no expectation to be had on the size of the round. I mean, this is something sometimes get misunderstood. I mean, first of all, one has to understand, that's how I felt as a founder. It's it's a bit of a privilege to get money to do very new things. And that's something that one needs to understand, is because the alternative would be to have a loan that you have to repay. I mean, that's the beauty of this innovation capital, and it is in a way, it is enabling people who have courage, talent, but no money to do something significant. So I think the size of the round tends to be overblown and to be like a vanity factor. In the end, what matters is, are you willing, able, and have the opportunity to build a lasting company, and to provide an exit for your partners and for yourself, and that is more important than having a bigger round than your colleagues.
Nevertheless, I would say on average in the Berlin market that's kind of the size. But I would never, and I think that's also what Christophe meant, is that you should not use that as a benchmark. It really depends on the business that you're running and what are you aiming for. Yeah.
A question to both of you: what are the differences between German and American investors both of you experienced?
Well, you have to understand that this venture capital and innovation capital has been around for 30 years more in the US than it is here. We are an emerging market, and therefore you will find multiple layer of experience that has built up in the US that you don't have here yet. So you have a hierarchy in Silicon Valley of venture capitalists, and there are people at the top that everyone wants to work with, and so it's actually nowadays very competitive to be an investor in the US, and thankfully I think that the know-how that has made Silicon Valley successful, which is the entrepreneur-friendly type of investor, is coming over. Whereas in my days, most venture capitalists were bankers that weren't were on the other side of the table. You will find more and more investors today that are on your side of the table, just in a different role. So I think that is the mechanism are the same, and the objectives are hopefully the same, which is to enable large company to emerge. But we have to be careful, both as founders and investors, not to try to be one-on-one with an ecosystem that is 50 times larger. So this you have to understand that in the US they invest about 60 billion a year, and here it's more before. Sometimes this get forgotten.
Yeah, and I'd say that a US investor or US type of investor has a more joint venture approach to this, to the venture. Yeah? So as Christophe said, it is more a partner, like from the beginning, than someone who is indeed sitting on the other side of the table. I agree to what Christophe said with regard to the size and also the maturity of the US market. But actually, it often also provides a lot of opportunities to be in a non-matured market. So,
yeah. So the beauty is that this, we will win one company at a time, and I think, more than ever, the landscape is open to any entrepreneur to succeed. The example here in Berlin who are actually building world-class companies. I mean, I saw in the list Naren from Go Euro or Get You Guy. These are companies that both in terms of what they are doing, how they're doing it, the level of growth and competitiveness are on par with some of the best companies worldwide. So it is possible to do that today. You will find all the support and that you need to do it. And that is actually relatively new. I think 10 years ago, we didn't have that ecosystem.
Maybe a different kind of question. We talked to a venture capitalist last week who said there are a lot of advantages having a venture capitalist on board, but also a lot of pitfalls, some of which you already mentioned. And he basically said if you have the chance to do it without venture capital, you should always try to do so. Could you elaborate on this?
That's what the venture capitalist said?
Yeah, it was like a...
Is he still on board with that fund, or?
I think so.
Okay. No, but I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, really, for me, it doesn't make sense to do it without a venture capitalist. I mean, that either means you have a business model that grows organically, but that is nothing that is startup could actually be and reflect. I mean, and to go for something big growing organically doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So you need to get cash on board. And how would you get that? Yeah, I mean, you could either go to a bank, but a startup model is usually not bankable. Yeah, okay, then you can go to your friends and family, but that's still venture capital. It's just that they might not have the background as a venture capital fund, but and therefore they might not take care or something. But it still remains venture capital. Or you could put in your own money. And this is something I would actually not do to a large extent, not in order to hedge risk, but one could argue that if with an idea you go out and you present it to a larger number of people that are in principle open for innovation and disrupting and crazy ideas, and none of them is giving you a dime, then there is a pretty high chance that you might have invented something really super cool or even a higher chance that you have invented something or you're out for something that for whatever reason doesn't work. So getting money on board is also a market test. So for that reason, I would not agree that it makes sense to work without venture capital. And I mean, I know personally someone who did a very successful exit in Berlin. That person now is also doing his a new startup because he really wants to, and he for sure had the cash to finance probably not only the first stage but also the second stage and do the A round himself. And he's not doing this. I mean, he's like from the very first moment he's out talking to venture capitalists and fundraising there and testing what his idea is about.
The role of the investor is that of a catalyst, I mean, which is to test the idea and to help, but it's also I think a very constructive bargain. Because you give shares, and the person who gives you money has no recourse. So he gives you only trust. There's not much you can put in the contract that would ensure success. So it is a very constructive, co-engagement.
Thank you. Thank you very much for spending so much time with us and all these valuable insights. Thank you for asking and for being here. We now have a small get-together. If you are interested in some craft beer, maybe I don't know, head on, but I think there will be more questions, eyes to eyes. And I think there will be some interviews if you're interested in doing some. But anyway, thank you a lot. We will recommence our event series. You already mentioned Naram Sham, who will be here in April. You mentioned him, sorry. Next time we will have the founder of FlixBus, who will tell us something about scaling. So thank you a lot, and yeah, maybe join us for a beer.
For sure. Thank you very much.